Hi, Darlene. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, Julia. It's great to be here today.
So excited to have you. We've had a little bit of relationship over social media, and I've seen you on so many of the lives, but I'm really looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better and bringing all your wisdom to our listeners. So thanks for being here.
It's a privilege. Thanks.
Yeah. What I would love to do to start is, could you share with our listeners a little bit about what you're currently doing with your IHP certification? And then at some point, I would love to back it up and talk a little bit about what helped you transition to being a coach and what you were doing prior to that in the health field.
Okay, thank you. Well, I currently work with clients one-on-one, both in person and virtually, to bridge the gaps in all aspects of wellness that are currently impacting their state of health. And my two deep dives have been food as medicine and balancing the nervous system. So the food as medicine part looks like, first of all, if you're my in-person clients, I bring my infamous basket with me filled with who knows what. And I call myself a foodie evangelist. I love expanding clients' palates by experimenting with recipes and sharing the bounty from my garden, maybe introducing them to dandelion pesto or spring tonic soup in the spring with nettles and sorrel. I had a client who had a recent discovery of a sensitivity to dairy. So I mixed up a few non-dairy beverages, oat milk, walnut milk, and then brought it to him to try and kind of taste test. And I like to tell people about herbs and the benefits of edible plants and weeds even. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I could talk about it forever. I love food. But the bottom line with food to me is I want people to have I want to expand people's appreciation for and understanding of the power of eating nutrient-dense foods.
Yes. Yeah, which is so important. And I feel like in kind of the health and wellness field, it can kind of get buried because there's so many other like big flashing lights, right? Like supplements and do this and biohacking that. And just like leaving the foundational food as medicine and how much food can either help or hurt you is sometimes buried in the process of kind of all the, flashy things. And it's so important. And I am dying to go back to it. We'll talk about a little bit that more for sure. And I want to know what's in your basket. But what we can do first is tell us a little bit about how you got here as far as being an IHP. What were you doing before that, and what led you to the transition?
Well, the majority of my career, I was a critical care flight nurse. My most recent position up through January 31st of 2021 was as the quality assurance coordinator in an outpatient surgery center. And I've always pursued excellence in nursing, and every position I've had over decades has afforded me invaluable opportunities for growth and learning, the power of active listening, the importance of prioritizing care and assessing situations, and especially the powerful impact of demonstrating compassion. But they were like stepping stones for me, crystallizing the fact that even though I was successful in traditional healthcare, my passion is and always has been health and wellness. It's like my wheelhouse. So when I had an unexpected transition out of traditional healthcare at the end of 2021, I just figured, okay, let's go forward and see what's happening. And a friend introduced me to Dr. Cabral's programs, and I was hooked.
Oh, that's so great. And when you kind of had the unexpected transition, was that something that kind of, not necessarily scared you, but was it kind of like, oh gosh, like blindsided you, right? I think we can kind of think of those moments as, or a lot of people can kind of look at it as, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Or why now? But if, I think it was maybe Tony Robbins who coined the whole, it's happening, things happen for you rather than to you, right? It sounds like you took that as a moment to, now step into, it sounds like it was kind of meant to be, right? It almost forced you to step into something that has been your passion for so long.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, I worked full-time as a nurse up till then. I made really good money. I got a paycheck every 2 weeks, had benefits, and I actually wasn't thinking of retiring for a couple more years. But there is such a benefit in realizing, okay, this situation isn't working anymore. And not only, it's not really like a victim, poor me, so much as I want to be effective. And if I can't be effective and I can't work with this person, then the best thing for this organization is for me to say, let somebody else do it. Let somebody else step in and take over. And I will admit, it was scary, partly what people thought, like leaving a successful career before expecting to retire, but the not knowing what was going to happen. But in your heart, sometimes you just know in your heart it's the right thing to do. And I prayed about it. I tried so hard. I'm not a person who gives up and walks away. I'm a team player. But there came a moment when it was this aha, like this is not working. And it's actually not healthy. It wasn't a healthy situation. So, and my friends and colleagues at the facility were very supportive of it. They were all like rather jealous in some ways, but cheering me on because they all knew that I needed to do something different.
Yeah. And sometimes, we can kind of get into this thought process that, walking away or leaving or, it's this weakness, but oftentimes it can be an incredible sign of strength of saying, this isn't for me. And maybe it wasn't for, the organization either. I love that you said, if you weren't going to be able to do it effectively, let somebody else, step in who thought they could work with a situation that seemed to be far too toxic and challenging, for you. And so I think that that's amazing. It shows incredible strength to be able to move on and say, okay, there's something else for me out there, and kind of going after it, even though you've had probably an incredibly respectable and successful career, right? It was probably bittersweet to move on.
Yes. To be really transparent, I've never had my heart in nursing other than flight nursing, because nursing is pretty traditional as a role. I mean, there's lots of options in your career, but there's something about it that it worked for me, but it was never something that grabbed my deep heart and soul. So I felt kind of guilty about leaving, but then on the other hand, I was thinking, oh my goodness. Yeah, God opened the door and was like, are you going to go through? You want to go through? Don't you want to go through? So yeah, I ran through, actually.
Good. Oh, that's, so wonderful. And we have so many nurses that do IHP. It's such this like amazing gap, because Dr. Cabral does value, some of the aspects of, traditional medicine, in the sense of it's not just this like one size fits all. Here's like the narrow holistic view, right? It encompasses so many parts of, Ayurveda, functional medicine, Chinese medicine. And it really is like this broad, that I'm sure a lot of it was stuff that you had kind of already learned to some extent, and probably taught yourself with your passion through the years.
Yeah. Yes. And there was these aha moments throughout the classes last year, both IHP 1 and 2. I love to learn. First of all, it energizes me. I could be a lifelong student and never work and make a cent and enjoy it. But there was so many aha moments that I went, oh my goodness, this is me. I've known about health all my life, but I've actually never unwrapped this or that. So that was fun too, learning way new things, especially the home health test, because I do have a background with labs and stuff, but in a different format. And so, and his enthusiasm, of course, is very infectious. And I was full on. It was amazing.
Yes. Yeah. It's an amazing program to kind of bridge the gap. What I would love to do next is kind of dive into a little bit of this thought, of food as medicine, how you approach it with clients, how it's kind of helped take some of your clients' health to the next level, what you see as kind of the biggest benefit. It sounds like you work with a fair amount of people in person. Is that true? I'm like, you're delivering nut milk? I should know.
Well, my client personnel was initially totally in person because I was new to social media. So my friends and colleagues told people about me. And so then I transitioned to virtual when I started working with some highly successful entrepreneurs. And they were in their 30s and 40s, and they like virtual, and it was good for me, a good stretch. But I think the thing about it is wherever a person is in regards to food, I want to expand their perspective. I want to stretch their imagination on the possibilities. And I garden. So if you were an in-person client, and I have had a few come here, I live out in the woods. So it's a long trek from Bellingham, Washington to my home. So usually I meet in town. But if you were to come here, part of what I would want to do is we would eat together. We would make something together. I would take you on a tour of my garden if you were interested. I would point out edible weeds. It's all this mixing together the fact that really, like you said, you can supplement all you want. You can work out like crazy. But if you're not eating healthy food, it's not going to benefit you, right? And we have a disconnect in our society right now about fast service, fast food, quick things. So there's a lot of work to preparing food, and I want to be realistic. So some of my clients who are the highly successful entrepreneurs, their lives are full packed on. So we talk about how they could incorporate something. Is it maybe a green smoothie? If they're an in-person client, I make a couple smoothies with some protein powder because this person says, I don't ever like protein powder drinks. They're terrible. So we play with the possibilities of what they can do. What fruit do you like? What's the vegetable that you'd like to include in your diet that you're not doing? And then I put it in a smoothie, and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't really taste that kale. It's not super assertive. And I want to, if I can, I'd love to inspire people to start gardening, even if it was a wee pot on their patio, because there is something so powerful about your hands in the dirt. There's a connection when you grow your food, you harvest it, you prepare it, and you eat it. And especially if you eat it with friends and family you care about. It's just a very powerful experience. And my career as a nurse kind of put me into a position where I ate fast. And so I didn't digest. So that's been a new thing for me. And I share that with clients. It's actually better to eat less and eat slow than it is to eat fast. So it's kind of like that. And it's fun to make people think about things differently, like such as, can you actually eat dandelion pesto? What the heck does it taste like? But it's actually excellent. And it's wonderful with gluten-free pasta if somebody's gluten-free or whatever. So I just love to make them think outside the box, and whatever they're at, wherever level. And I have a few clients who are literally people who just never made anything from scratch. Family grew up very poor. They ate it out of boxes. They don't know anything about drinking water. They drink maybe Coke or Pepsi or cold, some kind of drinks all day. They don't necessarily I don't like vegetables, that kind of thing. So we pull back, and I start with, how about simply considering increasing your water every day, making sure it's bottled water if they're drinking from a tap that I know has maybe fluoridated water in it. But it's simple steps trying to get people more comfortable with food wherever they are on their journey, because it has to be sustainable, right?
I mean, like everything, right? If it's, whether it's food, whether it's supplements, whether it's lifestyle, if it's not something that someone can sustain, it's just another, short-term fix. But why I think food can be so powerful as a means to wellness is because everybody has to eat. You have to eat food, right? So if you can find this relationship with it, and I love that you said, to get them to kind of think differently, because for so many people, it's their thought around food that even limits them in the first place. It's not really that they hate the taste of, spinach, but they remember that their mother used to make spinach, and they would just, boil the heck out of it, and whatever they added, they didn't like. And so that's their thought association with it, right? But stretching people's comfort and their thought around it can be such a shift to just get them thinking differently, right? Okay, so maybe they don't eat spinach for the first 2 months you work together, but they shift their thought around, what does food mean to you? What do you, what associations do you have with it? And making small changes, like you said, can create such a huge impact in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I've seen that even the aha of water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed how many people don't drink it. So that's if you're not drinking water, your body's not actually removing toxins and being hydrated and that kind of thing. So
yes. Yeah. I was just going to ask you, how you see it transform for people who specifically, right, if they're drinking Coke and they're, having food that's quick, and I'm sure you see, things change very, very quickly. Do you find that people are perceptive to what you're kind of giving them as far as, little sound bites at the beginning, and it just kind of snowballs from there?
I think so. I'm enthusiastic, as you can tell, about food, and it's what I do. So I'm living it as best I can. And I do think that it impacts, I believe my clients will say it impacts them. Some people, it's slower, right? Because it's their journey. It's not my journey. So that's something that we as IHPs I can look at a situation and go, wow. In my head, we automatically look at people without even thinking. And we might come up with a list of, they might benefit from A, B, C, D, E, but it's their journey. So as long as it takes them to start incorporating water, I cheer them on. I have had several gratis clients I did for gratis who are really financially hard up. And it also helped me as I'm learning to do this more effectively. But accepting the fact that they might take a while they'll go from 4 Cokes a day to 2 Cokes a day, or maybe happens. I have a client who drank 7 cups of coffee a day, super athletic, active man who competed in sports. We're talking healthy as can be. But, when he saw his cortisol levels, he was amazed. And we joked about it because 7 cups of coffee a day wasn't really serving him really well, right? It's not a judgment. It's just fact. So he made that decision. I said, you might always tell clients, if you were my client, Julie, you might consider.
Yes.
This, because it's not my journey. Again, I want them to think about it. And if I say to people, you need to do this or that, that's not right. It's like, what do you think about this? Could you consider weaning yourself down to 2 cups of coffee a day? What would that look like? And so I feel that the journey for me has been, and it still will be my whole lifetime, small, simple, sustainable steps. It has to be.
Yes. Yeah. And holding space for the client to take what, speaks to them in the moment, and, with obviously encouragement and, the container holding, but also not, making it seem like they have to do all these things at once, because we can I think everybody, especially, I'm sure you notice this with your, more, business, high powered, business people, right? We can only kind of put so much in our head and on our plate at one time without it causing, even more stress. Yeah. And so allowing someone to, just the other day, I said, these are the 4 things that I think would probably, help move you in a direction to you feeling better. Which one of these sounds best to start with if you were to choose one, right? Because some people can just do one thing at a time. I have some people that are like, just give it to me all. I am so ready to make the changes that I need to. And when I hear something like that, I'm like, okay, here are the 4 things. And they do the 4, right? But I think being a good coach comes with being a good, compassionate listener, which I'm sure you honed that skill in nursing and in your traditional healthcare system. Even though it wasn't the way that you passionately wanted to help, you probably have a very, I can tell, a very beautiful way of listening to people and picking up on, how can I approach this that it will best serve the client is such a beautiful tool as a coach. And quite frankly, it's what's missing in so much of a traditional setting. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. I feel that there's that famous quote. It sounds trite because it's said so much, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's been one of my lifelong pursuits, that I want people to know that I actually care and I honor their decisions. And healthcare in general, the people in traditional healthcare, physicians, nurses, and all the other amazing people actually really mostly care. It's just that their perspective is looking for symptoms, treating symptoms, coming up with diagnoses, and going from that perspective, right? They're not really trained to look at the whole person. And we are body, mind, and spirit. And anytime I try to disconnect that with myself, I go sideways. It doesn't work. And the root cause approach for health, the holistic approach, so speaks to me. It's got such truth in it. And if I could show you, I don't have it, but I had a little weed from my garden and I pulled it the other day because we had watered. And literally the top little leaf was this big and the root was like 14 inches. And so if I were just to trim that weed off at the soil, it would come back. It wouldn't go away, right? Yeah. And medicine isn't really in that perspective. And that's what's so amazing about the holistic root cause approach, that whole perspective. That's a different paradigm shift. I think it's much more impactful on the whole person.
Absolutely. Yes, because we know that even simply just to make the choice to have a healthier meal, right? You're leaving, for your lunch break, say you're leaving your office for a lunch break and you've just had a super stressful 4 hours at work. The choice, the ability to make a healthier choice in that moment is directly related to your body's ability to calm down, right? You might reach for a sandwich because that's going to actually calm your cortisol more than a salad will. It's an actual chemical response in the body that has way less to do with just your conscious thought process. I see this all the time with my husband. When his stress at work is high, he makes way less healthier choices when he's not with me than when his stress is well managed. And so everything is connected, and it's not just so simple as do this, not that. If it was that simple, I always say to my clients, a lot of my clients I wouldn't have. My clients that need or want and invest in the constant support, they know what to do. They need the encouragement. They need the support. They need kind of the connection of there's somebody who cares about my outcome. And we kind of have this relationship to where I'm supporting them in their ability to make better choices and continuing to educate, right? So that they can kind of have more autonomy, and I don't need to always be there to tell them what to do. It's an evolution in that way.
Yeah. Well, information is power.
Yes,
it really is.
Yeah. And I think based on, what I just said about, the being able to kind of regulate your nervous system in order to make, healthful choices. I know that you're kind of another thing that you love to do is work on nervous system regulation with people. And obviously that may or may not tie into the whole food is medicine thing, but what is your generalized approach in that sense? Do you find that that's kind of something you tackle after, at the same time? Do you kind of figure out where somebody is before you do that versus adjust their food? What's your love for the nervous system and how do you approach that?
Well, my first interest in it was because I had issues with it. So there were aha moments throughout my life when I realized, so I understand all these healthy things to do, but my mind, the tapes, how I approached and navigated stressors wasn't really super well, it wasn't serving me well. So what I usually do when I meet with a client the first time, we do a health history, kind of a deep dive into their past health, look at that, get information on maybe how they sleep. That's a big one that shows nervous system. And then also exercise. So a lot of my highly successful entrepreneurs are full on at everything, right? We talked about that. They're into health. They know their heart rate variability. They track their deep sleep, their REM sleep. They are pretty clean in their eating. They push themselves a lot. They competitively they compete in sports, but there's a disconnect between how chronic high stressors and the corresponding high elevated cortisol levels are negatively impacting their health. So that looks like for me with them is basically when we meet the first time, depending on some of the things they're kind of complaining about. Maybe somebody says, I'm having a hard time sleeping. I'm noticing I'm getting tired near the end of the day, or I feel wired and tired. So I talk about, diet, exercise, all those things, relaxation techniques, breathing. That's a new one for me in the last 10 or 15 years, is the power of breathing, grounding, the things that help people go down to a parasympathetic state. But the first thing they have to know is that that's what's going on, because what a lot of successful people can experience is their normal is maxed on. So we talk about what that looks like to maybe unplug. And how many moments in a day are you having quiet time, or are you off your computer or whatever? And there's aha moments for them. And we deep dive into options that work for them, because everybody's different. What works for them to help relax them is different. So I want to respect bioindividuality and help them navigate that, because at the end of the day, it's key to connect the dots of lifestyle, mindset, and spirituality in order to guide a person to wholeness. They have to have all of that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, high achieving entrepreneur type of clientele, at least what I've seen, sometimes I ask them to subtract before I add anything else in. We talked about like, here are the 4 things you could do. Sometimes I say, here are the 4 things you could maybe back from for a period of time. I've seen clients shift labs, shift symptoms simply by just pulling back on their exercise. It is this kind of specific, I would say, clientele that they, like you said, they do everything to the max. They're working out like crazy. They're working like crazy. They're, yes, maybe hyper focused on their nutrition. Everything on paper looks like they're, doing everything right, so to speak. But it can be sometimes to a fault where it's, too much. Their body is, their cortisol levels are reeling at work, and then they leave and they, increase them even more by going to the gym or something. And so maybe that person needs yoga and a walk and, less of that, real high intensity type of working out. And sometimes I can see huge shifts by saying like, let's just down regulate on these few things if it seems like a possibility. And sometimes it's really hard. Those are the people that are like, no, give me more things to do. Is there a supplement that I can take, or like, I'll do something more. And I find that it's a really meaningful exercise to ask them, what could you do less of? What feels like it could serve, a purpose if you did less of something? And sometimes that's really hard. And obviously, this is a whole other subject, but, it can be a distraction, right? Because some of these people maybe had childhoods where they were praised only when they did well in school, right? So they are high achievers because it's what, always got them love and attention. And they are looking to continue to, seek that approval. And not that that's a conscious choice, right? For so many people, we just learn adaptations as we're children that create kind of a lot of our patterns. And, people who aren't listening to, or who are only listening to the podcast and not watching it, didn't see you raise your hand as to, that was me in school getting good grades. Do you identify with a little bit of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Pointing 4 fingers back and 1 forward, probably. With grace, of course, giving myself grace and everybody.
Yes. Yeah. And I joke with my husband who he kind of thinks, or he was, in under the thought process of you constantly kind of like praise kids, that gives them confidence, which like, if you think about it quick, you're like, oh yeah, if somebody thinks that you're proud of them, they will be confident in themselves. And he like rolls his eyes when like my son will build something with Legos and he'll say to me, do you like this? And my response is usually, do you like it? What do you think about it? Or what's your favorite part? And he's like in the background, like, oh, here we go again. But when kids and my daughter draws, and he's always like, "Oh, you're an amazing drawer. Why don't you keep drawing?" And I'm like, maybe she doesn't want to draw right now. Just let her, he gives her praise for drawing. But then I find that that's like her go-to when she, feels a little bit withdrawn, or she's like, feels like she has to draw. And it's so amazing how a lot of this can just stem from childhood, right? If we were always hardwired to need to be succeeding at the next thing to get that next level of approval or love, right? Which our parents weren't doing anything detrimental by giving us good love and attention when we performed well. That can sometimes, and so like, obviously this doesn't happen right away, but after working months with clients, sometimes I just ask them like, where did your love for succeeding at everything come from? And you can just ask questions and get clients to get so present and thoughtful with where they're at with things. And like you said, bringing that whole spirituality, mind and body together.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And, I tell my kids, I did my best, made lots of mistakes, but I want my ceiling to be their floor. And that's not an original from me, but it was so profound. So that's all about life, right? We learn, we redirect, we try different things, we look at the world a little different perspective, but we always want our kids to learn from our mistakes. And it's so powerful to do that. It's humbling and it's powerful and it's important because, yes, we often don't realize the impact of words, especially as parents, on our kids. And especially women and the guilt of being a mom. I mean, I want to always encourage all my IHP colleagues who are in their childbearing ages and doing all these things and juggling stuff, because I can remember that it was important to have a balance. And sometimes it gets off balance. And an encouragement saying, hey, you're doing an amazing job showing up, giving your heart, doing your best. That's what you do, right? And that's what, at the end of the day, you and I look in the mirror each for ourselves and say, did we do our best? And then you have to be done with it.
Yes. And on days that you don't do your best, it's apologizing. Who do you need to apologize? With my kids all the time. I'm like, I did not have a good day. Mom got so frustrated about X, or, I can lose my cool. And I think just having open communication, right? And being able to say like, that was not the best, but I'm going to try better tomorrow for sure. Or I guess in the moment, like, yeah, it was my best, right? Because for whatever reason, I held it together as long as I could.
Sure. Yeah, you do your best. And especially in a journey, as I was growing up and then transitioning into motherhood, had some health issues. And I realized that the power in giving myself grace and learning to model grace for myself and others is that I impart that to my kids, because they pay more attention to what we do than what we say, right?
Not the truth.
And so for me, the journey has been saying, okay, how is my navigation of stressors not working for me? What do I need to let go of? And what's something I need to embrace or maybe take on as a best practice? And especially in the realm of motherhood, at the end of the day, like you said, your best is not always going to be 110%. But if kids know you really care and you can say you're sorry, like any relationship, right? Sometimes we treat kids different than we treat other people. We forget to say, or sorry, and not trite, but what can I do to make it right for you? That kind of thing. It's very powerful. And in relationships in general, I find that.
Yes. Yeah. And with ourselves, right? Because,
like
you said, giving ourselves grace and, it all comes back to that ability to regulate our nervous system and not be in moments of guilt or shame or having our bodies dysregulated from a stress standpoint and not taking, everything on and being able to kind of just, deflate things because no matter where you are in a stage, right? I think whether you don't have children and you're in a stressful job, or you have little kids, or you have big kids, right? People said to me early on, enjoy them little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
That's great, actually.
And So, every stage has its challenges. I think my mother recently said to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, seriously? She said, when you get older, you'll sleep a little bit better. She said, but there'll be nights where you still won't sleep because you're worried about your kids. And I said, well, who are you worried about? Which one? Me, my brother, my sister? Who are you? And she said, you still worry. I said, we're all doing fine. You should go take some melatonin and go to sleep.
Yes. My mom, who's no longer alive, used to say that. She would say, because we have 6 of us, there's 6 of us in a 20-year span. So she wasn't Catholic. It was, they wanted a lot of kids. So she would say, I don't care how old you guys are. You're still my kids. I know you're capable, but when I hear you're having a hard time, I'm concerned, and I pray extra for you. I'm just like, go for it, Mom, do it. I'll always take your prayers, always. But there is that heart of a mom. It's a powerful thing when you can let go. And for me, that's been a process of letting go and entrusting them to God, who is way more powerful than I am and who loves them way more. But that's been a lifetime process for me.
Yes. Yes. And again, it's, it goes back to it. The process, is likely your own ability to kind of find that peace within yourself that allows you to do it. Right. And that all comes with embodying everything that, we know to give us spiritual, mental, physical health. And it's all encompassing. And, I think kind of to tie it back to a little bit of the beginning, having the ability to meet with clients before we had signed on. We were talking a little bit about, you were saying how you would love to just, like, if your dream job would be to go out to eat with people and hear their stories. Yes. And I shared what I've also shared on live recordings before, which is that I wanted to be a hairdresser because I saw that my aunt, I was working in her salon. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have these just like fun conversations. And it just seems like a happy atmosphere where everybody was always talking and sharing. And that was what drew me to that. But I think we're both doing that, right? We both get to have connection and conversation with our clients and hear them, right? And when we can hear and listen, we can provide the kind of like support and container for people to get better, whatever that means, whether it means making better choices, feeling better, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have one more little question for you. Your garden, you said that you believe kind of like getting your hands dirty. As far as that's concerned, so you said like a little pot, and I'm asking selfishly because I don't have a garden. And I think like people listening who might not also do this, might be like, because you framed it in a way that sounds like, yeah, I need to garden and I would love to do this for my kids. What's your favorite, if you like had to pick one thing for someone to start with, whether it was like an herb or, I don't know, tomatoes, what would be your like little thing that someone could get started with if it was just a pot or two?
Well, okay. So it would depend on where they live because, the location. So if you lived in my area, the Pacific Northwest, a great thing to start with is a herb like thyme, sage. Basil's a little more touchy in this weather because it likes a lot of heat, but a herb is a great thing. But for kids, I think a great place to do is start lettuce.
Yes.
Do some lettuce in a pot or a tomato. Lots of people do tomatoes in pots, and actually it works quite well. What I've realized, Julia, was all the years when my passion was in the garden, even as a kid. My dad was an avid organic gardener way before it was mainstream, but my passion was, I never realized that the passion and the peace I felt was because I was actually grounding and earthing part of it, right? I never put that together for years because I would tell people I sensed the pleasure of God and I'm at most peace in the garden, other than at a beautiful art museum or a cathedral with Renaissance music or something, but the garden. And so what I want people to do is have that opportunity, because some people don't live like I do, where I can walk outside and ground or earth anytime I want on a big plot of land, but they could put their hands in that soil and they can see something happen. And it's a miracle, like watering it, the seed, that little seed has everything it needs to create this amazing plant. And I loved fostering that with my kids. And it was fun, to, wow, look at it's coming up. And so I would start, or also you could say, to ask yourself a question. I ask my clients, what do you like to eat? What do you like to eat? What would you like to learn to grow? And so that starts a conversation too, because some people I hate herbs. Well, don't want to do that, but I've always liked a tomato, or radishes are another one that's really fun for kids, really fun. And probably a bigger pot, the biggest pot your patio can support is a great way, because then you don't have to water it quite so much and things like that. But yes, if you were my client today and you were in person at my house, I would probably drag you out to my garden. Most people don't mind it.
Drag me.
Yeah.
I would probably happily go.
So can I share what I have in my basket?
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay. So I picked it this morning. So I have some black currants and strawberries. I have a cabbage. Let's see. And I have
oh my gosh, let me see that cabbage. That almost looks fake.
Yeah, no, it's actually organically grown cabbage.
Beautiful.
And then I have radishes, I have sorrel, I have radicchio, I have lettuce, I have cilantro, I have kale. I have shelling peas. That's new for me. I grew up in the Southwest, and it's almost too hot to grow them. So now I grow shelling peas, and they're fun. You can watch TV and be productive by shelling the peas, anyway. And so it's fun to, like I said, make things from my garden for my clients to try, and just maybe pique their interest a little bit in the joy and beauty of doing some of their own gardening.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. That cabbage. For the listeners who are not watching this, they're only listening, go back and find the YouTube and so you can look at that cabbage. It looks like one of the fake ones that my kids have in their kitchen set. It's like so perfectly green, and oh my gosh. And my son's preschool, where he went to preschool, he went to a little Montessori preschool, and every week they would send home a basket, and you would fill the basket. And it would be like the snack basket. And then the basket would go back to school, and they would prepare whatever the family sent in for snack and whatnot. And when we got the basket, everybody kind of got similar things. Like there would always be carrots and celery, and, they would get peanut butter or some butter to put on the celery. And I took him to the store, and, he picked out a dragon fruit because it looked, new and unique. And we got like all these crazy, and the teacher emailed me, and she's like, what do I do with all this stuff? Like, I just open it and cut it. I've never seen half this stuff before. But they turned it into lessons, and, one dragon fruit kind of was like mushy on the bottom. So they let the kids like touch it and pick the seeds out, right? Kids just love that stuff. It's sometimes such a good way to just get them to try new things, and doing it from an early age, I think is so important, because then they build the appreciation and, the expansiveness of trying new stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Both my kids got their hands in the garden right away. And I mean, it was cute because my son would say, can I hug it? Can I kiss it? The little plants. And so sometimes there were casualties of war, but I never minded, because she and he developed a passion for being outside and the gardening. They both organic garden now. And so it's kind of fun, because if you have ownership, Julia, whatever you're doing, you have some skin in the game. It just deepens your connection with the process, and especially with the food and growing. And it's not possible for all people to grow, but I wanted people to be aware of where their food comes from, how it's growing, pesticides. That's a whole new area for me last year. Toxins, that was a deep dive for me as an IHP. I did not know that. So even this simple act of growing one or two things on your deck can reduce your exposure to toxins.
Yeah. And you get like the habit stack of,
yes.
I love you, you're grounding, you're earthing, you're outside, you're not inside, or you're not in a store. And there's so many aspects to it, just thinking about how we were meant to really thrive and survive in this world. And one of those things was being outside and growing our own food.
Amen. For sure.
If anybody lives near you, I would be coming for a garden tour if I were them.
Well, you're welcome if you're ever in the Northwest. ring me up and I'll meet you, and we'll whatever, depending. In the middle of winter, we don't have a whole lot, but spring, summer, and autumn, my garden, there's always enough to share. I want to be hospitable with people and generous. So I always share what I have. That's an important value system that I have. So,
and another, right, like another beauty, like that just brings more, peace and harmony to your own life.
Yeah.
And right. So it's just like this never ending loop of goodness.
Absolutely.
If people are listening and they want to connect or find out more about you, where are all of the places that they could do that, websites or social media or any of that?
So Instagram and Facebook at this point, Olson Integrative Health.
Great. Thank you so much, Darlene, for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success podcast. This was so much fun for me, and I appreciate you being here and sharing all that you did.
Thank you. It was truly a privilege to spend some time with you today, Julia. Thanks again for having me.
You're so welcome. Take care, Darlene.
Bye-bye.